Benefits Improvements Act, agreeing to a substitute amendment which is at the desk and passing the bill as amended.
Does the senator so modify his request?
Mr. President, I appreciate the suggestion by the senator from Illinois, as I believe I would be able to support all of those bills, but I do have information that senators on our side oppose or have objections to. Two of them would like to offer amendments or modify them, and so I'm not able to agree on behalf of colleagues that all the bills would be passed as written.
Mr. President, until the time comes, and I hope it's soon, that we can reach an agreement on all four bills, I will object to moving one bill from the package.
Objection is heard.
And I also would note that the chair is a co-sponsor with myself of Sections S-1792, Strengthening Investigations of Sex Offenders and Missing Children's Act of 2011, and perhaps we'll be able to make that work sooner or later. I'm sure we will. I thank the chair. Well, I did want to just take a moment. I had not prepared remarks, but would want to join with my colleagues in making a few comments about Senator Mikulski. First, I would ask that my remarks be made part of that portion of the transcript
without objection,
dealing with Senator Mikulski. Mr. President, Senator Mikulski is a great senator, a delight to work with, a formidable adversary, and a formidable ally in any important debate. She is someone that all of us respect and admire. It surprises me that she's been at this business so long. It doesn't seem like it's possible. She certainly hasn't lost her enthusiasm for the job, and she has played an important role in quite a number of issues that the country has had to deal with. I remember her leadership on an important issue during the post-9/11 time when we were wrestling with how to deal with security for our country. She spoke up firmly or strongly in favor of firm action to defend America from attack. Another thing that I don't think has been mentioned but is exceedingly important, something that I have observed her deal with and provide leadership on for some time, and that is space and NASA. She is one of the absolutely most knowledgeable and experienced members of this Senate and the entire United States Congress in dealing with the complexities and the needs of NASA, and she is a champion and advocate for exploration of space. This is something America has led the world in, and for all of her time in the Senate, she's been a champion of advocating the United States maintain this leadership, because I think we share the view that America is a nation of explorers. We're a nation that leads the world in exploring, and it's part of our DNA. And so I just really appreciate her leadership in that particular area and have watched her with great admiration in her activities. So I didn't realize the remarks would be going on this afternoon. I didn't have prepared remarks, but I just want to join with my colleagues to say how much I appreciate her. We celebrate her great accomplishment in the Senate, and I do believe that as we go forward, we'll find that in issue after issue, she has played a critical role and a positive role in making America a better place. I thank the chair and will yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Delaware.
If I could, I'd like to follow our colleague from Alabama in speaking for just a few minutes about our friend and colleague, Senator Mikulski, who celebrates a milestone in her career of public service to the people of Maryland. I asked my staff to go to the web page for Senator Mikulski for Senate office, and I just came across one paragraph. I just want to read this to my colleagues if I can. It's pretty brief, but it says, Barbara Mikulski has never forgotten her roots. Throughout her career, she has returned home each night to her home city of Baltimore, Maryland. From a community activist to United States Senator, she's never changed her view that all politics is indeed local, and that her job is to serve the people as their day-to-day needs, as well as prepare this country for the future. Sometimes people have come to Congress over the years, and they come here understanding clearly that our job is to serve. And over time, somehow they lose that thought a little bit, and it's less clear who is to be served and who is to be the servant. She's never forgotten who the servant is. She knows that she came here as a servant, and she'll leave here someday as a servant. Hopefully not anytime soon. Those people, you ask most people around here, what are maybe one or two words that best describe Barbara Mikulski? I think a lot of people would say she's a fighter. And let me just say, if you're an advocate for a particular cause, she's the person you want in the foxhole with you. There's no better advocate, and there's no more able opponent on an issue. Believe me, it's a lot better to have her on your side than it is against us. When I take the train home at night, I go through Baltimore on my way to Wilmington, Delaware. And along the route, we go by a place called Aberdeen. Sometimes the train stops there, sometimes it does not. Aberdeen Proving Grounds, we've seen consolidated literally from across the country much of the important research activity that the Army does at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. The person who more than anybody else has made that possible. It's a huge, vast facility with thousands, I think tens of thousands of employees, mostly civilian, and a campus that's over, I think, 100,000 acres that does great work, helping to provide for our defense against all kinds of attack, foreign and domestic. But she's a great person to have on her side in leading that fight. One of the other things I love about Barbara is her devotion to first responders. There's a big national fire school in a place called Gaithersburg, Maryland. She's helped make that place possible, and not only train folks who are first responders for Maryland, for the people of Maryland, they train first responders for virtually every state and every corner of this nation. And for people who go to bed tonight, knowing that if there's a fire or a problem, an incident in their community that needs to be responded to, they can thank Barbara Mikulski for helping them ensure that the folks in their community are ready to do that. As much as anybody I know, she's a person who values service, AmeriCorps, encouraging young people, really people of all ages, to volunteer and to serve. The ages of our pages here, and people a whole lot older, the ages of guys like me, that we all have an obligation to serve and to bring that spirit of service to our lives, whether we're in public life or not. I'd say one or two other things. One, I was struck by the fact that she often opened, as the kids began a lot of her days, as her dad opened the family grocery store early in the morning there in East Baltimore. And I was born in West Virginia, a town called Beckley, and I didn't grow up there. I lived there about the first 6 years or so of my life, but go back many summers, and I had the opportunity there to work for in a supermarket, a mom-and-pop supermarket of my own, where my own grandfather opened a store almost 6 days a week, and I had the opportunity to see him and his work and what he brought to that store every day as the butcher, and the idea of serving. I think I learned more about serving by working my summers in that store than anything else I've ever done. And I suspect one of the reasons why Barbara has become and adopted and retained the spirit of a servant is because of her childhood and growing up and seeing her own family, her own dad in that particular store. Last point I want to make is this. Well, maybe two more. I mentioned my grandfather in West Virginia. His wife, my grandmother, suffered from Alzheimer's disease. My grandmother's mother suffered from Alzheimer's disease. My own mother suffered from Alzheimer's disease. And I don't think there's anybody in this body who's really done more to lead the fight to ensure that this scourge of our society, and really a scourge of people all over the world, is reined in and overcome. And when that day comes, people stand forward and say, well, I did something about this. Nobody in this body, I think, can take more credit for conquering Alzheimer's disease and dementia than Barbara Mikulski. And finally, if I could, I don't know, people probably don't think much, when they think of Barbara, they think of a fighter, they think of an advocate for volunteerism and some of the other things I talked about. I don't know that many people think of her as an athlete. And, but I will say that she's really, she's a big advocate for leveling the playing field. She wants to make sure that people, not just in athletic endeavors, have a level playing field in which to compete, but she wants to make sure that young people, whether they come from the most impoverished backgrounds, have the opportunity, have a real shot at life, to get a decent education as a kid, the chance to go to college, and to increase their potential to not just to earn money to support their families, but to live productive lives. Those are just some of the things that I think about when I think of Barbara Mikulski. And we're closed by saying to her, who she'd been in the House, I think, for 6 years when I arrived there in 1982, 1983, and for all the time that we served there together. She was always very encouraging of me, very supportive of me as her Delmarva buddy, who shared the Delmarva Peninsula with her. And even to this day, on issues that include trying to make sure we have a strong, vibrant poultry industry on the Delmarva Peninsula, I think we're still, I'd like to state, I think that we're still Delmarva buddies as we look out for the mutual concerns of our respective states. With that having been said, let me yield back my time, and I see that Senator Cantwell is ready to speak to the floor, and my guess is she's going to say some more things about Barbara, but those are some things I'm really pleased I had a chance to say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do rise to celebrate the remarkable achievements of my colleague from Maryland, Senator Mikulski. Last January, we celebrated obvious achievement of her becoming the longest-serving female senator, and last Saturday, that milestone entered another chapter with her 12,858th day of serving the people of Maryland in Congress, which means she is now the longest-serving female member of Congress. I know that Barbara Mikulski started her career fighting for Fells Point, a particular location in the Baltimore area that she thought needed to be protected. And that galvanized her to 24 years of service where she's been a trailblazer on so many issues. Many people have talked about these today, about being the first woman elected to statewide office in Maryland, being the first Democratic woman to serve in both houses of Congress, the first Democratic woman to sit in the Senate leadership position, and the first Democratic woman elected to the Senate in her own right. So throughout her career, she has faithfully provided a very strong voice for the people of Maryland, but it's here in the Senate we've all got to see Barbara Mikulski, the dean of the women senators, and to see her incredible work as a trailblazer on so many important issues. She has been a tireless champion of things from pay equity to increasing access to college education, for women's health care law, and time again she has proven that she knows how to fight on the right side of the issues. And for the women of the Senate, she is an incredibly important ally when it comes for each of us who've come to the United States Senate to find our way and to make our own mark. Barbara Mikulski is the senator who's always there with you to make sure that you can achieve what you want to for the state that you represent. I know for me, I'm very excited. My colleague from Alabama was mentioning Senator Mikulski's love of NASA and space and exploration, and I can say that Senator Mikulski is certainly interested also in sci-fi, and I would call her a techie senator because she certainly has shown a great deal of interest in technology and in science. As the chair of the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Subcommittee, she's been a key partner on funding of key science and technology issues. And for us in the state of Washington, when we needed a new Doppler radar technology system, she was there to help ensure that those people who lived in coastal regions were going to have the appropriate protections that they needed from understanding inclement weather. She also has helped in prioritizing things like the cleanup of Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, something we in the Northwest relate to because we strive to have the same cleanup of Puget Sound. And we've worked together on important legislation like passing the Lilly-Ledbetter legislation. But it's Barbara Mikulski when it comes to protecting women's access to health care, or standing up for any attack on Medicare, it's Barbara Mikulski who is the most articulate, the most determined, the most persevering advocate to make sure that women's issues and their cause is understood in the United States Senate. I was proud to stand with her when she went up against the House plan to defund critical women's health care access, and there was a near shutdown of government. And as people tried to pressure Planned Parenthood, she was there to make sure that we continued important programs like breast cancer screening. So today, I join my colleagues from the Senate to thank her for those years of service in the United States Congress, both in the House and the Senate. And while she may represent Maryland, we all want to claim that we are better off as a country having Barbara Mikulski in the United States Senate. And to my colleagues or the young people who are here with us on the Senate floor, to understand this moment and achievement, you have to understand that in the whole history of our country, there's only been 39 women senators. And a good number of those women senators only served a few days or a few years. So the fact that somebody has achieved not just a seat in the United States Senate, but a leadership position in the United States Senate is an incredible achievement. So we are glad that she has represented a time where women have ascended to leadership in the United States Senate and are considered one of the wise members when it comes to strategy on so many policy issues. So we are better off as a body because Barbara Mikulski has served with us, and we are looking forward to many, many more years of wisdom and hopefully many more women senators joining the ranks of Barbara Mikulski in their tenure. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President. The Senator from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today also to pay tribute to my colleague, the senior senator from Maryland, Barbara Mikulski. As everyone has said, this is a landmark, this is a milestone, the longest woman senator and a member of Congress in the history of Congress, serving more than 35 years. Let me just say this, as a relatively junior member of this body, I love Barbara Mikulski. I love her because she calls me Franken. That is just music to my ears. We're in the caucus lunch, I'm maybe in her way, she goes, Franken. I'm not only a relatively junior senator, I actually kind of recently was a comedian at one point. And she's really funny, Barbara. I remember the first time I saw her speak, it was years ago. I was at I can't remember what the event was. And I'm going to try to quote her joke. It was her joke, remember, about herself. And she said that she talked about her first campaign ever. And I think it was for city council or something like that. And she said, well, I knocked on 7,387 doors, and I walked a total of 372 miles, and I didn't lose a pound. So I love Barbara. And she's just a force, just a force of nature. And being the dean of women here isn't her most commanding title. Her most commanding title is a fighter. She's a fighter. And when she commits herself to a cause, she is a true champion. She is a true champion for America's seniors, preserving pensions, Medicare, defending Medicare. Boy, don't attack Medicare around Barbara Mikulski. And combating poverty. No one works harder for quality education, making sure that every child, we're fighting to make sure that every child has a quality education. And so that child can pursue the American dream. And she's committed to following our country's promises to our veterans, which is so important, and to increasing community service and volunteerism. As anyone who's watched proceedings here in the Senate knows, Barbara Mikulski, as my colleague from Washington stated, is the greatest champion in the body for women's health. Here's something that's pretty amazing to understand. I want the pages to hear this. She fought to include women in NIH clinical trials. Women were not included in the National Institutes of Health clinical trials until she made sure they were. That's just hard to believe, isn't it? But in your 16 years of life, at 16, you can't conceive of this. This is how backward we were. Think of what she did. That's who we're talking about today. She has improved access for women to mammograms and cancer screening for just for all women. And she has fought for women's choice to protect their own, they have their say over their own body and reproductive system. Basically, what I'm saying is, when you have Barbara Mikulski on your side, you have a strong voice in the United States Senate. We've heard reference to her accomplishment on the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. When advocating for this bill, Senator Mikulski said, and I quote, "Women earn just 77 cents for every dollar our male counterparts make. Women of color get paid even less. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act will empower women to fight for fair pay by once again making employers accountable for pay discrimination. I will fight on the Senate floor to get this bill passed." And the bill was passed. It was the first bill that President Obama signed in office. Senator Mikulski and I share a number of passions. One of them is early childhood education. Increasing early childhood education, access to it, is one of my top priorities because we know over and over again the benefits of early childhood education have been demonstrated. And Barbara knows this. And I wanted to have a hearing on just the economic benefits of early childhood education, just the economic benefits, because a child who has a quality early childhood education is less likely to be a special ed kid, is less likely to be left back a grade, has better health outcomes. So a girl's less likely to get pregnant before she graduates high school, more likely to graduate high school, more likely to go to college, more likely to graduate college, more likely to get a good paying job and pay taxes, and much less likely to go to prison. It's been shown over and over again that the cost benefit is like for every dollar spent, it's like $16 in return. I wanted to get a hearing just on this because we're talking about education. I thought that this really needed to be discussed, and we needed experts, economists who are credible on this. So I went to Barbara, and she, of course, said, "Oh, yeah, okay, let's do it. Now, she is chair of the subcommittee on children and families. And she said, and I thought that'd be a good place to do it, except that I'm not on that subcommittee. I'm on the help committee, which is this is the subcommittee of, but I'm not on that committee. But she said, okay, well, it doesn't matter. You come anyway. And not only that, but what witness do you want? So she let me pick a witness, Art Rolnick, an expert in early childhood education on the economics of it, who started out as an economist at the Federal Reserve in Minneapolis and got into this really on the economic benefits of it. So she is a true ally. She's someone who will use her resources as chairwoman of a committee to make sure that something that you really feel strongly about will be aired, will be discussed. And you learn from Barbara that really what we do around here isn't so much about policy. It's really about people. For her, it's about the people of Maryland. She goes to bat for them time and time and time again. It's about kids. It's about women. Who often have to both be the breadwinner and the caregiver, and who should have the rights, every right and every opportunity at work and in society that men have. And as both a member of the United States Senate and as a father of a wonderful daughter, I'm enormously grateful to Senator Mikulski for being a tremendous role model to women in this country, for having fought her way to the United States Senate, and for proving that legislating wasn't a man's job, or only a man's job. It is a man's job, too. This body is so much the richer for her, and Americans are so much better off as a result. But her work, our work, isn't over. Out of 100 senators, there's still only 17 women. Our nation is facing tremendously difficult challenges, and having more women like Senator Mikulski in the room will help us solve these problems. I'm glad she is here leading the way. And with that, I would like to thank Barbara for her leadership, her friendship, and for being such a fierce advocate. Congratulations, Barbara, on your achievements thus far and on this milestone. I look forward to many, many, many years fighting alongside you, Barbara. Thank you, Mr. President. And I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President. Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, may I ask that the pending quorum call be lifted?
Without objection.
And if there are further remarks in the series of tributes to Senator Mikulski, may I ask unanimous consent that my remarks, which will be on a different subject at this point, are moved within the record outside of the tributes for Senator Mikulski so that they may be uninterrupted in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I'm here today to introduce the Disclose Act of 2012, what we are informally calling Disclose 2.0, in recognition of the original bill that Senator Schumer worked so hard to get passed a few years ago. The Supreme Court's 2010 decision in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission opened the floodgates to unlimited corporate and special interest money in elections, bringing about an era where corporations and other wealthy interests can drown out the voices of individual voters in our political system. Worse still, much of this spending is anonymous, so the public does not even know who is spending millions to influence our elections. Here's how my home state newspaper, the Providence Journal, explained the Citizens United decision. The ruling will mean that, more than ever, big spending economic interests will determine who gets elected. More money will especially pour into relentless attack campaigns. Free speech for most individuals will suffer because their voices will count for even less than they do now. They will simply be drowned out by the big money. I think events have proven the Providence Journal correct. Senator John McCain recently described these events. He said, "I predicted when the United States Supreme Court, with their absolute ignorance of what happens in politics, struck down the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law, that there would be a flood of money into campaigns. Not transparent, unaccounted for, and this is exactly what is happening." If you look at the 2006 and 2010 congressional elections where there wasn't a presidential race going on, after Citizens United in 2010, there was a four-fold increase in expenditures from super PACs and other outside groups compared to what occurred in 2006, with nearly three-quarters of that political advertising coming from sources that were prohibited from spending money in 2006, three-quarters of it. Also in 2010, those 501c4 and 501c6 organizations spent more than $135 million in unlimited and secret contributions. Anonymous spending rose from 1% of outside spending in 2006 to 47% of outside spending in 2010. Nearly half of the money spent through these outside organizations is anonymous and secret. If you look at the 2012 race that we're in right now, a presidential race, and compare it to the last presidential race, we are already seeing similar ominous signs about the influence of money. The Federal Election Commission predicts that over $11 billion will be spent on the 2012 elections, about double what was spent in 2008. Super PACs, mostly linked to individual candidates, spent about $100 million through the Super Tuesday contests in the Republican presidential primaries. Again, about twice what was spent over the same period in 2008. In the 2 weeks leading up to Super Tuesday, outside PACs that supported the Republican presidential candidates spent 3 times as much as the candidates themselves. Our campaign finance system is broken. Immediate action is required to fix it. Americans of all political stripes, whatever your persuasion, are disgusted by the influence of unlimited, anonymous, corporate cash in our elections, and by campaigns that succeed or fail depending on how many billionaires the candidates have in their pockets. Editorial boards across the country decry this new pollution of our politics. Republicans like former Governors Mike Huckabee and Tom Ridge have concluded that super PACs are, in Mr. Huckabee's words, one of the worst things that ever happened in American politics. 7 in 10 Americans, including a majority of both Republicans and Democrats, believe that super PACs should be illegal. Countless Rhode Islanders are fed up with the influence of corporate money in elections. I hear them at my community dinners. I read their mail. Charles in Little Compton wrote into me, "It is wrong that someone who shouts louder or further, in this instance solely because they have more money, should drown out another person. Corporations have no problem getting their views aired." Hope Whitney in Bristol wrote, "Just the idea that a corporation is considered an individual in regards to politics goes against everything American to me. They've become the emperors, as they have the financial ability to be heard everywhere. I'd be willing to bet that a majority of their own employees do not agree with their political representation." Elizabeth in Wakefield wrote, "Big business should not control our elections. It is bad enough that they deeply influence our politicians through lobbyists. But because of a 5-4 decision by the conservative judges in Citizens United, Congress cannot prohibit super PACs from drowning out the voices of ordinary Americans in our elections." That leaves us with one weapon left in the fight against the overwhelming tidal wave of money from special interests, and that weapon is disclosure, daylight, information. Today, along with 34 other senators, I am introducing legislation that will shine a bright light on these powerful, shadowy interests. With this legislation, every citizen will know who is spending these great sums of money to get their candidates elected. I'm delivering this speech at a time that Senator Bennett, the distinguished junior senator from Colorado, is presiding, and I'm very conscious and aware as I deliver it of the immense amount of work that he has put into the process of preparing this legislation, working on a strategy for going forward, working with our leadership to commence that strategy, and I am grateful to him and to the other senators who I'll mention later, but since the senator from Colorado is presiding, I'll give him the lead. In 2010, under Senator Schumer's leadership and guidance, we came within one vote of passing his original Disclose Act. Since then, the problem of anonymous and unaccountable corporate money has become dramatically worse. And Americans are losing faith in our political system as a result. More and more people feel that their government responds only to wealthy and powerful corporate interests. As they see their jobs disappear and their wages stagnate and bailouts and special deals for the big guys, they lose faith that their elected officials are listening to them. For our democracy to remain strong, this trend cannot continue. We must redouble our efforts and pass the Disclose Act of 2012. The bill we're introducing today has been trimmed down so that it just does two simple things. One, if you're an organization like a corporation, a super PAC, or a 501c4 group spending money in an election campaign in support of or opposition to a candidate, you have to tell the public where that money came from and what you're spending it on in a timely manner. That should not be a controversial idea to anyone, at least to anyone who's not seeking special influence. If you're a top executive or a major donor of an organization spending millions of dollars on campaign ads, you have to take responsibility for those ads by having your name on the ad, and in the case of an executive, appearing in the ad yourself. That's it. Two simple provisions, disclosure and a disclaimer. These are reasonable provisions that should have wide support from Democrats and Republicans alike. The Disclose Act of 2012, the Disclose 2.0 Act, trims down the original Disclose Act in another way. We have raised the threshold for donations that require disclosure from $600 to $10,000. Now, it may sound like $10,000 is a ridiculously high threshold, that that's just an awful lot of money. But when you look at what's happening in these super PACs, $10,000 in this particular world is no big deal. 93% of money raised by super PACs in 2010 and 2011 that can be traced to specific donors came in contributions of $10,000 or more. So we will catch probably 93% of the money in this reporting provision, while leaving smaller donations and dues payments to membership organizations private. The Act also does not require the disclosure of non-political donations, affiliate transfers, business investments, and other transfers of money that have nothing to do with electioneering. At the same time, however, the bill also contains strong provisions to prevent the use of dummy organizations or shell corporations to hide their donations from public view. The way this bill is drafted, if somebody sets up a phony organization to take a contribution and in turn make that contribution to another phony organization and in turn make that contribution to another phony organization before it finally lands in the super PAC that is benefiting a candidate, we will be able to trace that series of transactions. So it's a good law, it's a simpler law, it's an effective law, it only goes after high-dollar givers, and passing it would prove to the American people that Congress is committed to fairness, that we are committed to equality, and that we are committed to the fundamental principle of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. In closing, let me thank Senator Schumer for his exemplary leadership and determination on this vitally important issue, as well as Senators Michael Bennet, Al Franken, Jeff Merkley, Jeanne Shaheen, and Tom Udall, all of whom have worked very closely on this legislation. I would also like to thank the Act's other co-sponsors, all 35, who, like me, understand that the legitimacy of our democratic process and the integrity of our democratic elections are at stake. I look forward to working with any of my colleagues here in the Senate, any, who feel that the voices of American citizens should be defended, and I hope that all will join me in supporting this critical piece of legislation to restore integrity to our elections. I yield the floor.
The Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, I rise today, along with so many of my colleagues, to pay tribute to Senator Barbara Mikulski, an extraordinary woman, an extraordinary senator, someone who has become the longest-serving woman in the history of the Senate, indeed in the history of the United States Congress. She surpassed, on January 5th, 2011, the record of Republican Maine Senator Margaret Chase Smith as the longest-serving senator, and just this Saturday, she became the longest-serving woman in the history of Congress, surpassing the tenure of Edith Norris Rogers, a Republican congresswoman woman from Massachusetts who served in the House from 1925 to 1960. Senator Mikulski is the first female Democrat to be elected to the Senate in her own right. She was elected in 1986. She is a woman of many firsts. She is indeed the Dean of the Senate Women. I would actually say probably the Dean of the Senate, with her great energy, her great eloquence, her great passion, particularly for those who are often overlooked in our society. She comes at it honestly. She was a social worker in Baltimore, helping at-risk children and educating seniors about Medicare before she got elected to the United States House of Representatives. And she has taken that concern for the vulnerable and a particular passion for the state of Maryland forward every day she's served in the House and the Senate. She has served on numerous committees. She is a subcommittee chairperson on the Appropriations Committee, as Commerce, Justice, and Science. She has devoted herself to those issues and many, many more. She's served on the Select Committee on Intelligence. She's been a key member of the Education Committees of the United States Senate. She has left her mark on a broad range of programs that touch each and every American family. She's been particularly active in improving women's health, ensuring that women were included in NIH clinical trials, where in the past they were ignored. But since you can't ignore Barbara Mikulski, that's virtually impossible, she made it the reality that you can't ignore women at NIH trials. She required federal standards for mammography. She's ensured that uninsured women have access to screenings and treatment for heart and cervical cancer. She's increased research dollars for Alzheimer's research. She's enhanced the Older Americans Act. She has been, since her first days in the United States House of Representatives, at the forefront and advocating for better health care, better education, particularly for the most vulnerable of our society. She's championed national service, understanding that in a great country you have to contribute as well as benefit. And she said that she's most proud of, in her words, strengthening the safety net for seniors by passing the Spousal Anti-Impoverishment Act. This important legislation helps keep seniors from going bankrupt by paying for a spouse's nursing home care. Again, a fitting and representative sample of her extraordinary work. Throughout her service, she has maintained national priorities, but she's never taken her eye off Maryland. She commutes home every evening to Baltimore. She works very, very hard to ensure that the people and the state of Maryland benefit because of her actions and activities. Now, I also want to thank her for the kindness and the help that she's given to me personally in so many different ways. Her concern, for example, with the fishing community in Rhode Island, under her jurisdiction on the Appropriations Committee and in other ways. She's been terribly important and terribly kind to us. She was instrumental to help us to secure funding for a Hope 6 project in Newport, Rhode Island, which has created extraordinarily beneficial housing for a mix of incomes in Newport. And it's one of the most attractive as well as one of the most stable communities, I think, any place in the nation. She has been there to help us constantly and consistently. Now, I could go on and on, as my colleagues have said. I simply want to say at this very special moment in Barbara Mikulski's career, we thank her, we admire her, we respect her, and she has set the example for us. In the days ahead, she will not only continue to inspire and sustain us, she'll continue to inspire, sustain, and lead her state and this nation. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
The Senator from Ohio.
Asking unanimous consent that my beginning of my remarks be placed alongside other comments like Senator Reid's about our senior senator from Maryland.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Some time ago, I was reading a book about the beginnings of the interstate highway system in our country, and I came across a paragraph when highway builders and the federal government were going to run an interstate highway through some stable middle-class, working-class neighborhoods of Baltimore. And the highway administration was greeted by an organizer who, on behalf of citizens of this neighborhood, said this is not the place to put this highway. And she was successful in convincing them that the highway should go elsewhere so it wouldn't be so disruptive of so many homes and well-established small businesses and the cohesive community in that part of Baltimore. And that woman who led that effort several decades ago was Barbara Mikulski. She was not yet on city council. She was a citizen who spoke up for her neighbors, and she's continued to speak up for her neighbors, first as a member of city council, then a member of the United States House of Representatives, and for many years since for 3.5 decades of the United States Senate. We heard Senator Reid and others earlier in the day talk about Senator Mikulski, first female Democrat to serve in both the House and Senate, first female to be elected to the Senate without succeeding a husband or a father, first woman to chair a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee, and perhaps most importantly, helping to blaze this path. In 1970, only 2 female senators. One was the daughter from Kansas, the daughter of a presidential nominee a generation earlier. The other, Barbara Mikulski. Today, there are 17 female members of the Senate. Doesn't look like America yet, and this body surely doesn't look like America. It doesn't have anything close to the number of minority members as a percentage of the population, as a percentage of the Senate that our population does. I hope that changes. I think it will. And it doesn't have anything close to representing the gender makeup of our society. But to go from two female senators when Senator Mikulski first came to 17 today, and if I could predict elections, which none of us can and should certainly not even try, I think there's a pretty good chance, and I know the presiding officer thinks this too, that there will be a number of additional significantly more women in this body at this time next year. But I want to say a couple more things about Senator Mikulski. Then on a less serious note, I want to talk about something else that I've been privileged to serve on 2 committees with Senator Mikulski, the Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee during the health care legislation, and she was so helpful to so many of the causes that we care about in justice in this country, and on the Appropriations Committee, where she cuts a wide swath of involvement for the state of Maryland and for this country. She champions women's health. Many have talked about this earlier today. She cares so much about National Institutes of Health, not just because the National Institutes of Health is located in Maryland, but because it matters so much for scientific research, for curing a whole host of diseases and preventing a whole host of diseases, and the work that the number of jobs NIH creates, not just government jobs, but the jobs that come out of commercialization of scientific research. And my state is one of the leaders in whether these jobs come out of Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Southwest Ohio, or Case Western Reserve University in the medical school, in the medical center around Cleveland. We see that kind of commercialization. She's also, I call Barbara Mikulski often Coach B, because she, as someone who's been around here a long time, she is always willing to advise newer and younger members. And she's been following her, especially in my state, for what's important in my state. In addition to health care, and my state's has some of the leading health care institutions in the United States of America. Also, what she's done with the space program. The only NASA facility north of the Mason-Dixon lines in Cleveland, with a satellite near Sandusky, Ohio, called NASA Glenn, named after astronaut and former U.S. Senator John Glenn. And what Senator Mikulski has done is one of the strongest advocates in this country and in this Senate for a space program, and science and technology research and development has been particularly helpful to me as I fight for the kind of work that NASA Glenn does in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm I'm so appreciative, Senator Mikulski, for that. Mr. President, I'd ask for unanimous consent to separate the rest of my remaining words.
Without objection.
I rise today to talk about a new record that has been set. It has nothing to do with the number of votes the highway bill garnered last week in the Senate. It has nothing to do with length of service of Senator Mikulski. This year, for the first time in history, one state has 4 teams in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA Men's Division I basketball tournament. That's the state of Ohio. Special congratulations to Ohio State University in Columbus, the University of Cincinnati in Hamilton County, Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and Xavier University also in Cincinnati for their outstanding run so far in making our state proud. I'm hosting for the 5th time an annual Ohio College Presidents Conference next week. We bring in 50, 60 college presidents to meet with each other and to meet with me and to bring in we bring in people from the administration, Republican, Democratic House and Senate members who lead on higher ed issues. We bring these 55 or 60 college presidents in from Ohio for a day and a half from 2-year public and private institutions, 2-year community colleges, 4-year colleges and universities. They learn best practices from one another. They build relationships that help all of them, all 55 or 60 of these college presidents, do better. Perhaps we'll talk a little more about college sports this year because of these 4 Ohio teams that made the Sweet 16. And we also know that another point of reference for Ohio this year, March Madness started in Dayton and what's become an important tradition in the Miami Valley and in our country. The weekend before the game started, Dayton's Oregon District hosted the First Four Festival, where 15,000 people crowded local restaurants and bars, listened to live music, and watched games on big screens. A few days later, President Obama and British Prime Minister David Cameron came to the same city where the Dayton Peace Accords were negotiated. They joined the Dayton community and teams from Kentucky and Mississippi and New York and Utah and their fans from across the country to watch the first rounds of the NCAA Division I men's tournament at the UD Arena. The UD Arena now holds, University of Dayton Arena now holds the national record for the number of NCAA basketball games, tournament games held in a single venue. The business community in Dayton, one of the most active in the country, the Dayton Development Coalition, rallied together to make sure military families from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base were able to attend. $3.5 million was pumped into the local economy, showcasing the Miami Valley's world-class tourism infrastructure of hotels and parks and recreation entertainment. We saw the same thing later in the week in the Arena District of Columbus, where the city hosted games on the opening weekend. Local Columbus leaders and businesses hosted teams from St. Louis and North Carolina and Michigan, New York, Tennessee, California, and Washington with their fans. The city expected a $10 million impact on the local community, with tens of thousands of people staying in hotels, eating in restaurants, and enjoying one of the fastest growing cities in America, where I might add the presiding officer once lived. We saw a boost in tourism in northern Ohio, where Bowling Green hosted the first and second rounds of the women's basketball tournament of the NCAA. Organizers in Bowling Green said the games were more about basketball. It was about people from across the nation coming to town and boosting the sales of small businesses. All the excitement and economic activity goes to show that Ohio is a tremendous attraction of basketball tourism and basketball talent. As the tournaments continue and Ohio teams continue to win, I look forward to working with our communities and business leaders to further leverage our assets in tourism and recreation to help create jobs throughout our state and to promote economic development. Mr. President, I thank the presiding officer. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President,
Senator from Illinois,
ask consent the quorum call be suspended.
without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that following morning business on Thursday, March 22nd, the Senate resume